See, everybody's coming back from lunch, so we'll just give them a moment to come in, and we'll give our panelists a moment as they work their way in. They should receive an invitation to join with their camera and their microphone. If they haven't, if they'll just little hand down there at the bottom, if they'll just hit raise my hand, they'll put you in. Hey, Betty.
Hey there. I had a problem getting to my table, and I'm concerned I'm going to have a problem when we are supposed to go out. My little help bubble has a like a cartoon thing, need help, and it's covering up floor one, and I cannot. Yeah, I can't move it. It won't move, so I don't know that I can get to floor one. Yeah, and they said I can't, the icon for help can't be disabled. It's fixed in the system. So anyway, I don't know.
You click on the floor and move it.
No, Mike, I know that. The problem is the floor is covered up, and I can't, when I click on it, all I get is the
never mind. You're what you need to do now.
So yeah, you guys are right here. We're live to the whole audience. So
okay,
Betty, what I would invite you to do is, if Matthew or Gene or I guess one of the folks from hasn't found you by the time that we go to our table after this, they will. Otherwise, we will wait patiently for you at the table. So welcome to everybody, and on the screen for the e-commerce panel. We have a great group of consultants and experts that are here with us. So I'm going to introduce them, and I'm just going to be real brief. We did get an extra 5 minutes on our panel. So I'm not sure if you guys heard about that, but we have a whole 5 extra minutes to have a conversation with the group before we move off into our tables. But today, joining us to talk about e-commerce is Betty McIntosh, Senior Managing Director with Cushman and Wakefield, Brad Migdal with the Senior Managing Director, also with Cushman & Wakefield, and Mike Dvorscak, the Principal with the William B. Hare Company. And we're going to talk about e-commerce. Certainly, you've had a chance to, everybody out there knows what e-commerce is, has used it, and you guys are probably hearing lots about it. Before we get into some of the questions, let's go up to 50,000 feet up in the air, and let's talk about what you're seeing with e-commerce and COVID and projects. And I'm going to start, Mike. I'm going to start alphabetically with you, if you don't mind.
Well, thank you, Eric. So my niche, you might say, in this e-commerce landscape is site selection, finding a place to put one of these big facilities, or in some cases, smaller facilities when you're talking about last mile infill types of locations, places where those little white vans go when you don't see them in front of your house. And there's a continuing demand, a continuing growth, need for e-commerce facilities. It was certainly accelerated by COVID. And you have what seems to be a basic rule of thumb is for every $1 billion in sales, it requires another 1 million square feet of space to service that somewhere. And so that's where they come to me when I'm having a good day, and they say, all right, we need another one of these sites. But I'm finding more and more that the sites that I'm dealing with have a lot of water features that have to be taken into consideration. Or what can also be difficult is rock. I have one client who is looking at a site right now that they are looking for, that they're looking at. It's, let's say, around 100 acres. And they would, see how I can put this without revealing something that's a little too close to home. So they're competing for an e-commerce deal of a little over 1 million square feet. And they have a site that the client likes the location because it's close into the population area. But because of the rock, the site development cost is about 5.5 times what you would normally see on a typical site. So what does that mean, Mike? Well, what that means is that the tenant has got to like this area enough, and that gets into other people's areas like labor, incentives, logistics, or the actual travel, that they're willing to pay about $1 a square foot above market to be there. So I got my fingers crossed, but fortunately I have some other things that I'm working on too. I don't think I'm dependent on that for putting food on the table. But that's just an example that I'm using. It's real time. This is actually happening now. That's sort of illustrative of the kind of challenges we're seeing these days when it comes to actually putting a building up.
Now, Betty, next, 50,000 square feet. And I don't know if you brought props like Mike did. But
I don't.
what are you seeing?
My dogs might chime in, though. So with the pandemic, it's been interesting. We've had stops and starts of projects. I think as Mike said, the e-commerce has just, companies who were putting their toe in the water just got thrown in, sink or swim. And so we'll see how they will be doing. Our industrial brokers have had a robust year, and it seems like it's still going very strong, which I think is good signs for all the communities. And I hear from the communities there's a lot of activity. They're seeing a lot of interest in industrial and other projects too. And I don't just work industrial, I work tech projects, which are pretty robust as well. I think, you see a lot of things, but the e-commerce space particularly, I think we're just going to see continue to grow. Supply chain is interesting, as now we all got so used to Amazon 2-day delivery if you live in the city, and then that extended to a week or 3 or 4 days, or in some cases 3 or 4 weeks. But that seems to be tightening up now, and I'm sure it is with all the e-commerce projects. They're figuring that out, and I think some of that, certainly the disruption from the Asian markets for supply chain, but also if they had COVID in their facilities, and trying to figure out social distancing and how to handle that situation so that their labor was not as steady as it had been before. So it took them longer to process things, but certainly from an e-commerce thing. And I think it's important too. I have heard that communities are using this time to get their sites ready, and so I think that's important as well. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Brad, last time we talked, you were standing at the post right there at Augusta National. I'm sure you wish you were there today. Tell us what you're seeing in the e-commerce world out there.
I mean, listen, a lot of it is playing catch up, right? I mean, I think the one thing that we learned in the pandemic is that the move in e-commerce just got accelerated. I mean, I think we knew where we were going to be, where we are today. We just didn't think we'd be here in 2020. I think the vision would have been here in 2024, 2025. But, the pandemic just accelerated everything. I mean, I think from all generations, there's nothing better than when a package is ordered and my 8-year-old ordered it because they have Amazon on their iPad and daddy doesn't have like the block on it, to my grandmother who's telling me that she ordered this great book from Amazon and she's never going to go to the bookstore again. So you have an 88-year-old and an 8-year-old both being able to order, and have a product delivered right to their door because they're not leaving their house, right? So I think that is, expedited the industry. And I think that everyone talks about, the company that rhymes with Amazon, that they're doing fantastic. But I mean, everybody else is, catching up to speed. And I think Betty brings up a great point, is like, we all got, into the Prime 2-day delivery, right? But I think one of the unique things that we saw is that Walmart rolled out their, version of Prime. And I think, as we buy stuff too, we've seen other companies do things too. So we have all these other companies that are out there, trying to meet the demand. But I think the speed to market is always going to be delivery. And because of this e-commerce growth, we've seen growth of all the original equipment manufacturers, for lack of a better term, because they got to get that product within the facilities of the users that are ultimately sending it to the end user, right? So you think if there's 1 million square foot, 3PL or big delivery service, you're going to have, the manufacturers all nearby. So everybody's kind of flocking to get to these facilities, but it's just opened up the door as another channel for sale. And I think the other thing too is going to be interesting to see how these brick and mortar retailers who have these long-term facilities or these outlots or anything to that extent, how they're going to utilize their current footprint to take advantage of it. I think if we look back and we saw what Kohl's was able to do from the returns facility and how much it increased their foot traffic and it increased sales within their store, you're going to see that change as well too. And I think that Walmart's vision is that with their, new, membership program. And I think Target's going to use their brick and mortar stores as well too. And I think that those are going to be the unique things that use it. I think it's how do you play catch up? It's like, what are the brick and mortars that are left and what are you buying? And I think the retail bankruptcies are going to be interesting as well too, to see how much more e-commerce growth is. I mean, I can't tell you the last time I was inside a regional mall. It's getting cold where I live right now. So this is like mall season, sitting in the food court and hanging out and, I should say I'm not high school anymore, but, doing those type of things. But, I don't know if that's there anymore, right? So what's going to happen with the big department stores? I mean, we saw the bankruptcy of Neiman Marcus, Lord and Taylor, Macy's has struggled. I mean, so I think from a retail juggernaut, it really becomes as to what e-commerce is going to be and who's going to buy from e-commerce going forward. So I think we've got a lot of, unique things happening. I just think, the reality is that when you see a building on the corner of Main and Main that's 1 million square feet, that's 36 foot clear with cross dock, you're going to see a run on it. I mean, to Mike's point earlier, it's just finding those sites and finding Main and Main. Where is the definition of Main and Main? And, I think that the one other last point I want to make is like labor. I still think e-commerce is still going to drive a lot of labor. And with the hospitality labor that's not there, is still going to be there. I mean, your traditional distribution facility, people always talk about, 1 million square feet with nobody in the building. Those were pallet to pallet and pushing. E-commerce is pick and pack and everyone getting unique. And I'm a big, abuser of that as well too. Because like if I would tell you what came today from Amazon was a lot different than what came yesterday, and somebody had to go find it, and it had to come from a different fulfillment center from one location to the other. So I think that that's a unique aspect of it. And the question is what are you going to buy from e-commerce and what are you going to buy from brick and mortar? And I think everybody got so into buying from e-commerce during the pandemic that I think that the continued growth of e-commerce will continue to be there. But I still think we'll see brick and mortar and traditional retail as well too.
You bring it up, Betty, you brought it up, Mike, you did as well. Sites, getting sites ready. There's the corner of Main and Main. Communities using this time to get sites ready. I know I'm going off script from the questions that we talked about, but you're bringing this up, and I'm wanting to know what is a good site? How can communities get those sites in front of the right people? If I'm out there and I'm a local community economic developer, which I am, that's the question I have is, am I the right spot and do I have the right stuff and how do I get it in front of you guys?
Well, from what I have seen, the right site is number one driver is population density. Okay, the more people, the more likely a fulfillment center is going to want to be close to that. And close varies based on, all the factors that fit into that, from land price to accessibility, transportation. But close after that location is labor. So, and we were talking about this the other day, Eric, there's projects that are looking a little further out for reasons that they may not share right off the bat, but I'd be willing to bet that labor is driving that. They're willing to have those trucks roll 10 or 15 miles further if it means that they can get the people they need, whereas if they tried to be in closer, they're either paying too much or there's a plain shortage. So I think that the main things that drive this are the population centers, the logistics, and the labor.
I tend to agree a little bit. I think that every different e-commerce provider has a different strategy, and you can call e-commerce distribution a lot of different things, right? So, are we going to see the hub and spoke model? Are we going to see the last mile infill model? I mean, really what we're going to see, and then kind of how the product is distributed, right? So, like, if you're an individual retailer and you're getting all your pallets from your manufacturing facility, and you're going to have an inbound facility where you're going to see bulk pallets and then bust them out and send them out to other places, that's going to be a different distribution / e-commerce location than if you're having parcel cars that are delivering to the individual, the last mile for the consumer. So I think, as you sit and you drive through your subdivision, you see that gray parcel car with the smile on it, that's coming from a different type of facility than the ones that we're seeing that are a little bit further out that have 1 million square feet that, 2,000 employees picking and packing all day long. So I think it's really kind of understanding kind of what you're, into Mike's point, from a population density, what your community really has and what you can achieve, right? I mean, I think first and foremost, the most important thing that an e-commerce facility is going to look for is access to interstate and highway. If you have a site that's 20 miles off the interstate and highway, it's not really going to be a logistics type site. You could be for a manufacturer, but you're not going to look for a logistics. So surprisingly, which I don't think most people really recognize, but when you start looking inside these facilities too, you got to have a good amount of power available. These automated are really driving a lot more power than one would think. And again, we talk about automation in a different way than what we would all think. But like when you're looking at automation from e-commerce facility, you have, boxes and moving stuff all over because people are picking and packing from different areas, and you have a packed cart. But it's not a traditional pick cage where it's just a cage and a bunch of stuff sitting. You got stuff moving, and you have, conveyors and everything moving through the facilities and different levels and stuff like that. So, power is extremely important. And then, I think Mike would agree with me on this, is like, got to have the right zoning, from the zoning perspective, because the truck traffic is going to be something that's going to be huge. I mean, if you have a site that's on the corner of Main and Main, but you got a neighborhood backing up and they don't want to hear idling trucks at like past 9 o'clock and before 5 a.m., then you're going to have a problem as well too, because we're going to have trucks moving in 24 hours a day because we're cleaning up the picking and packing on the graveyard shift to get it ready to go out, in the morning, and then to start repacking again during the middle of the day. So I think, as you start looking throughout this process, there's going to be a lot of changes all over the place. I mean, so I don't foresee that there's really a true answer to what is great for e-commerce, but I think your critical factors are, you got to make sure that you're comfortable with trucks, a lot of people. You potentially have access to public transportation to get people that don't have cars that can get there, and that you have a good amount of power. And that's really what you're going to need to deliver good e-commerce. And then I'm going to tell you this, I mean, pad ready may be just as good as a shell because, listen, we're at 36 foot clear today. I hear we're going higher than that. So the question is going to be, how high are we really going to go? So, that's really where you are. And then obviously if you get a good developer, a good institutional partner in your market, that's going to help you as well too, because someone's going to start getting out of the ground and getting ready and get some footings there and getting able to get that precast and tilt those walls up. You'll be in a lot better shape.
Well, we're seeing 40-foot buildings pretty common now.
Yeah.
And I was thinking back about a conversation that I had at lunch, actually, where an economic developer was telling me that his community was complaining that They're on an interstate. They have plenty of land, but they aren't getting any e-commerce, and they have labor. And I said, well, you're not near the population. So that's kind of my point of reference.
Right. And I agree with you, Mike. I mean, you've got two places is, how close are you to where they're delivering the product and how it's being distributed. And then you're absolutely right. Labor is still, and Brad, you agreed with this, it's still a driving force. I think what I've seen too is, as Brad brought up, there's so many different models. So if you have a lot of automation, you might have an 850,000 square foot building, but you're spending another 30 million in automation. So you're only going to have, 250 people full time and then seasonal help. Or conversely, you're spending 14 million on a same size and you have 1,000 people because it's more labor intense. And so those different situations create what you were saying, Mike, how close you are to a main labor pool. When our folks do their labor analysis, they do it generally by an MSA with some substations in there. And so from a labor perspective, they show commuting patterns, things like that, to say, anywhere within this certain radius of, say, Indianapolis or Memphis or Atlanta or, wherever, you can get labor, and these counties are better than those counties. But again, a lot of that's very dependent on whether you need 1,000 people and a bunch of temps during peak time, or you need 200 people. Very, very different situation. And the 200 people one can push out further. I just had a project down in the Houston area, and they went kind of out from Houston. They wanted to use that port and Houston market and have the population that they need for distribution, but at the same time they didn't need so many people, so they could go further out, which meant the land was cheaper, the incentives were better, things like that.
Yeah, I think that Betty makes a good point. It really comes on what they're going to do with inside the four walls. If you're busting up pallets and you can automate, and then you're boxing out and shipping out to other locations, you're going to have a totally different model. And then sometimes too, if you're receiving pallets in bulk shipment, you may be wanting to be off a rail because you're getting some of your product on rail. I mean, so it's so dependent on what the particular seller is doing. Then the other thing too, that that's really driving it is, who's the common carrier that's delivering the stuff? Like, you could have an e-commerce facility where you're receiving and busting everything and putting it in boxes, but who's actually doing the final delivery? Is it what 3PL is doing it? Is it a common carrier, meaning like UPS, DHL? So I think if you're near one of those facilities, that's going to change the environment as well. So you have this, entire situation that is so dependent on so many different factors that are going to drive the way that we look at the site differently than you would in any other situation. So I think my clients will tell you that we could be gun-ho and go ready to go see a site and then realize that it doesn't make sense, right? But I think what Betty made a great point is the supply chain study is when we first usually get the answer, and they're like, okay, we need to be somewhere within this 125-mile radius to hit this customer. So once we have the supply chain, e-commerce is the intersection of supply chain, human capital, and real estate. You're bringing them all together to find that one harmonious place that's going to be able to deliver. And really, that one harmonious place, at the end of the day, for an e-commerce company, is going to be what's the most cost-efficient place. So you could have the best land site, the best everything, but if you're the most expensive, then someone's going to go somewhere else, because at the end of the day, margin in e-commerce is, especially with the fact that that most of these e-commerce companies have to eat the shipping costs, they need the ability to have that lower structural cost. So, we talk about it all day long, like from personal property tax, real property tax, inventory tax. income tax, sales tax on boxes, whatever that they're paying, those structural costs have to be really low to make it a great site, because once you're giving up shipping, which is somewhat demanding, you got to find a way to cover that cost and pick up your margin, because again, you're looking at volume, but like at the end of the day, you still got to have profitability on a per unit pricing. And it goes back to, if you have Amazon Prime, and I use that as a joke, and you're getting a tube of toothpaste for $1.97 on Subscribe and Save, and it's coming to you every single month, if the shipping's costing more than the product. So they have to have the ability to make margin in other ways by having lower structural costs.
Well, everybody, thank you so much. I don't know if y'all hear the Oscars music, but I think it's starting to play. This has been our panel on e-commerce, guys. Thank you guys for talking with us today. I know everybody will look forward to seeing you out on the tables. And Betty, I hope you take care of that dog. So no, thank you guys. This was great.
Thank you.
Thanks.